Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mark's Day's Creative Differences. A monthly live stream where I talk to writer friends about the little things that make a big difference to their craft and careers, in the hope that we can give readers some insight into the creative process and writers and other creative folks some practical advice that they can actually use. I'm Mark Stay, author, screenwriter and podcaster, and if you're joining us live, feel free to ask questions in the comments and take part in the conversation. Emski's here helping me today. Say hello, Emski. Hello, Emski. Thank you. And as always, a big thank you to Dominic Currie for his jingle this month. It has a Halloween flavour. Let's hear it again. Now, there's a slight change to the show this month. Now, those of you who joined us for last month's episode with LJ Shepherd, wonderful as it was, may have noticed we had some buffering issues. Such are the perils of live streaming. However, I was clever enough to record separate audio and video streams, and the version that went out live on the podcast and on YouTube had none of those buffering issues, and sounds and looks absolutely amazing. All thanks to Kai. Come here, Kai. Say hello, Kai.
Hello, I'm Kai. I put stuff together. I edit. It's like Lego, but less expensive.
Kai is my daughter's fiancé. They're engaged to get married. Please buy lots of my books. We have a wedding to pay for. He's put all sorts of super whizzy things in there. And I'm paying him an absolute pittance, aren't I, Kai?
Yeah.
Yeah, so from now on, I'm going to treat these live streams as, well, live shows. And if anything goes wrong, we'll just roll with it, maybe start again, blah, blah, blah. And then the podcast and the edited YouTube version will be the glossy edited version. But why, I hear you cry, well, should I bother turning up for the live streams when I can get a glossy edited version? Well, for a start, if I should accidentally fall off my chair, fart, or spontaneously combust, or perhaps all three at once, then you get to see it live. Also, perhaps more importantly, you can ask questions of the guests and interact in a way that you can't do when listening to the podcast in the gym or on your yacht or while sitting on the loo. You can leave now, Kai.
Okay,
Thank you,
Master.
Kai.
Okay.
Thank you. Back to your editing booth.
Okay.
Thank you. Bless him. He's lovely. He really is. He's a lovely boy, isn't he?
He's wonderful.
He's a keeper, isn't he, Em? Yeah, brilliant. And now let's meet our special guest. She is the author of Garden of Her Heart and host of the podcast Right, Damn It. She's an experienced coach with more than 35 years working on mindset and teaching others to be expert coaches. It's only Zoe Richards. Zoe, welcome to the Creative Differences podcast. How are you today?
Hello, I'm all right. Not bad at all, considering this is my bug year. But let's not go into the bugs. We're going to keep all positive.
I know I sent you a few questions in advance, but there's something I noticed in your bio that had somehow passed me by. And you said I did 50 things in my 50s, which included stand-up comedy. So first of all, tell me about the 50 things in your 50s and tell me about the stand-up comedy.
Well, I've got to say, Mark, if anybody's thinking of doing a number of things in the decade of an age, do it when you're 20 or 30. Don't wait until you're 50, because that 50 is a lot of things. And I didn't quite make it in my 50s because we had a pandemic. And so I did have to extend some things into my 60s. So some of it was really simple stuff, like there were cities I wanted to visit. A friend challenged me, my wonderful friend Tony, who cycles to work every single day and does more than 1,000 miles every year on his bike. He challenged me to do the Way of the Roses, which is 173-mile bike ride from Morecambe Bay to Bridlington. I didn't even own a bike, Mark. When I went, yeah, why not, Tom? I'll do that, yeah. So I had to buy a bike. First ride I did on it, it was called Cav, my first bike, before somebody pinched it.
Right.
Yeah, the problem was that I thought I'd done about 10 miles and I'd only done 4. So,
Yeah.
it was hard work getting up to being able to do 60-ish miles a day. That was tough. But we did it. And we did it to raise money for MS, for the MS Society, because my husband, Rob, has multiple sclerosis. And the only person who didn't get off their bike to go up the hill coming out of Settle was the man with MS.
Wow.
He cycled if anybody's ever done the Way of the Roses, they know there's this incredibly steep hill coming up out of Settle. And it is not one to be thinking, I can easily just cycle all the way up there. I was amazed Rob did it all the way to the top.
When I was 15, I did the London to Brighton. I've never been fitter than when I was 15. That was the fittest I've ever been. And going up and down the South Downs, I remember there was a point in that going uphill where I said, Mark, never, ever let yourself be talked into anything like this ever again. So I take my hat off to all of you for that. That's phenomenal.
So yeah, I decided I would like to have a go at seeing what it was like to do stand-up. So there's a fabulous couple of comedians locally, one who's now doing a national tour. He's doing a 2025 tour. He's done a 2023 tour. Literally national, and that's Sam Avery. And then the other one, so anybody who's had kids may have actually come across him as the father of twins. He did a big thing around being a father of twins and what that was like. Right. And then another local one from my own town is Bren Riley, and the two of them ran this how to be a stand-up comedian course. And at the end of it, you had to do your set on stage. And so the first time I did it, my routine was all about my 50 things in my 50s. But the second time, so I went around again saying to them, right, actually, I enjoyed that, but now I want to do it seriously. It's not just a case of doing it as one of my 50 things. So then that was about me being a crap mum, because I was. I think I probably still am. I hope Ellie's not watching this.
I doubt that's true at all, Zoe, but go on, carry on.
It's true. It is true. I used to start my routine off by getting on stage and go, oh, hang on a second, folks, hang on, getting my phone out and go, oh, it's okay. It's only my daughter telling me not to embarrass her. Let me tell you a story or two. Yeah, so I was in Manchester. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there's rivalry between Liverpool and Manchester. Always has been.
No, pull me up a chair. I never knew.
So with that rivalry, when you've got even the slightest hint of a Scouse accent, and any Scouser will say I haven't. My mum was from Plymouth, so I was corrected. If I said "weh," she'd go "what?" If I said "piss," she would go "pass." So I was corrected my whole life. And so I haven't got a proper Liverpool accent as a result, as you can tell. But Manx can tell. So I literally got just the slightest bit of applause. So when I did Manchester Lit Festival and I got to the end and I got a massive round of applause, so I picked up the mic again and went, hang on, folks, I've got to say thank you, because last time I was on stage in Manchester, nobody applauded. But it was great fun.
I admire stand-up comedians tremendously, because it's one thing. I've done a lot of theatre, but that's someone else's script, or sometimes my script. But you know, it's usually so, and it's usually been worked. I mean, we've seen comedians, like when we lived in Epsom, people like Lee Evans would come to town and start their routine with, and he'd hold sheets of paper, and if he said, "Oh, that doesn't work," he'd toss it away, and the tickets were like a tenner. It was great.
Yeah, you're workshopping it.
Every comedian I know has died a death on stage, and I'm over. I did enough of that when I was doing theatre, frankly. So it's but also speaking of accents, because my son just graduated. We have a fully qualified unemployed actor in the house. That's wonderful. He did classes on accents, and when he needs to do a Scouse accent, he says a can of Coke, and he says here, a can of Coke. So that's his trigger.
It's a bit like, I don't know if you remember Tom O'Connor, years ago, a comedian on telly, and he used to say, if you want to do a Northern Ireland accent, all you have to do is pull your lips really tight, and you can't help but do a Northern Ireland accent. But you know that you get a muscle structure per, as per your area that you were brought up in. Yeah,
and different accents are in different parts of the mouth as well, and it's all very strange. Because I grew up in a London working class family, and Claire knows when I'm on the phone to my family, because I've become a Cockney geezer all of a sudden. But when I'm because I went to school in Surrey, when we go and see my family in London, my nan would say, "He don't talk like us, do he?" So I was considered the posh one of the family. But anyway, before we offend any more regions of the United Kingdom, let's talk about the reason you're here, Zoe, is Garden of Her Heart, which has been called a warm hug of a book. But then you did name your protagonist Holly Bush, which I think is just cruel. So just tell us about Garden of Her Heart.
And Holly has never forgiven her parents for giving her that name combination. Her sister, Rose, and the cat, Lavender. So, her mum clearly had something of a sense of humour. So the story is about recovery, it's about community, and it's about purpose. And Holly is somebody who's got both physical and mental health scars. She's at a very low ebb. Because she had an incident happen in work, and work was a travel agent's, she has been offered a free holiday and told that she can go literally anywhere. And so she chooses to go up the road from home, which is in South Liverpool, up the road to Formby to a retreat, and is dreading the idea of a retreat. I won't say why, but there is an example of when her mum took her on a retreat when she was 17 years old that maybe wasn't quite what she was expecting, but it was certainly for women of a certain age, let's put it that way. So she goes to the retreat, almost immediately regrets it, and starts to think of going home. And as she thinks of going home, she actually ends up finding herself doing a little bit of weeding in the kitchen garden that needs a lot of TLC. And through the kitchen garden, she goes through her own recovery, but also helps other people on their own journey to recovery too. And then there's a hint of romance, but I would say it's more about friendship than it is about romance. The romance is more about helping Holly remind herself that despite her injury, she actually can still be attractive to somebody else.
And what I noticed in the book as well is you use journal entries all the way throughout, which gives us a lovely insight to Holly's state of mind. Is that something, first of all, is that something that you've used? And also talk about that as a literary device. How did that help you at all?
Probably worth saying, first of all, so I'm a suicide survivor from a long time ago. So I went to the doctor. My method was to go down to the beach, and I was intending to drive into the sea. I won't describe any more than that. That's sufficient for you to know about. Because I then went to my GP, who suggested not to give me any drugs, but actually that he should give me a fit script of going out and doing something like walking on the beach. So I don't think he quite got where, I mean, he was lovely, I've got to say. I was very fortunate I did have a very good GP. But talking therapies was also offered. And I don't know whether you've noticed, Mark, but I don't really have much of an issue with talking. But also because I'm a trained coach, I'm used to the kind of questions. So I can intellectualize. If you ask me the kind of question that's asked in talking therapies, I know the question already. I can give an intellectual response to it. So I'm not actually going to get into that subconscious and deep conscious, unconscious mindset. I'm going to actually be dealing with it at a very conscious level and give you an answer that's just off pat. So journaling is something that I found was quite helpful. And I also found that for Holly, that it was a really useful tool, not only that it shows her progression, because it starts off, she's barely writing anything. Yeah. The counsellor has suggested to her that she's carrying on doing this as daily pages, and she's going, yeah, and she's not. And then gets to the retreat and does end up doing it as daily pages and starts to actually share more with herself, let alone sharing anything with the reader. So it becomes a device for her personally. I don't know if you noticed, but the weather gets better. The amount of hours of sleep gets better. What she wears starts to be more specific to what she's doing, as opposed to, as we are when we're depressed, just picking up the thing that's on the wardrobe and just throwing that on because it's the nearest thing to have. You mean your daughter doesn't have a wardrobe? My daughter had a wardrobe. When I was writing this, I had a dream in my head, Mark, and I thought, don't be ridiculous. No publisher is ever going to do that. And my dream was that every journal page would look like it's out of a notebook.
Yeah.
I never said anything to the publisher because I thought, don't be ridiculous. It'll cost them more and they won't want to spend more than they have to. And what happened when I saw the proofs? It had the journal entries as if they're on pieces of notepaper. And I absolutely love that we had the same vision without having the conversation, which I just think is amazing.
It really helps pace as well. It helps with tone. So if you have a heavy scene, you can have a light little interlude with the journal or whatever. It's a brilliant device just for just keeping the momentum going and alternating the pace and everything. And I doff my cap to you. It's really masterfully done. I think it's one of the reasons why people have really fallen in love with this book, because it's so easy to read, which is one of the biggest compliments I think a writer can get. Actually, a lot of people go, "Oh, if it's easy to read, it must have been easy to write," and that's really the case, is it, Zoe? Yes.
Although it's fair to say, though, Mark, that I actually wrote the first draft very quickly. I was rejected by my favourite agent, and her response was, if you write anything else or if you do a rewrite on this, I'd like to see it because you're clearly a good writer. So I thought, well, I'm not losing that opportunity.
No.
I've got to do something, but I'm not sure I'm ready yet to rewrite this other novel. So I'll apply my learning in writing something completely different, and then I'll go back to that other novel.
Right.
And I applied my learning, and it was Garden of Her Heart. And when I got to the end, I thought, oh, this book's actually got legs. I need to do something with this first. So it was quick to write initially, just 3 months. But I do think some of that is also the job I've done. I could be told on a Thursday, I need a report from you by Tuesday. In fact, I've had one occasion where it was 5 o'clock. I need a report from you 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I didn't finish it until 3:30 in the morning. So I've had situations where I've had to just pull it out the bag, no matter what, for execs. When I've been writing reports, I've been writing for the most senior level of execs. And so you've got to do the best work you possibly can in the shortest time that you can. And I think that's been incredible training for me, for them being able to sit down and apply myself to what I'm writing with my novels.
Until you're published, you don't necessarily notice, or until at least you're working with a publisher, you will have radio silence for months. And then suddenly it's, Zoe, you want this? Zoe, you want that? Can you have this to us by Thursday? Zoe, can you have a bio of this? Can you do us a synopsis? We're going to talk about synopses in a minute. Can you do this? And then suddenly you're like, where were you 6 months ago when I was twiddling my thumbs? So it's, that's what a lot of traditional publishing can be like. But before we move on to that, I want to discuss, and we've sort of touched on this a little, but I want to talk about resilience, both in terms of writing and in life. I mean, it's been a very tough year for a lot of my writer friends. The industry seems to be paralyzed by indecision. We keep hearing the phrase survive till 25. So it's almost as if this year has been written off and maybe some good things might happen next year. I mean, I know you've had various highs and lows in your life, as well as your writing career as well. As someone who's worked with other people and coached people, let's talk about resilience. What are the strategies that you found helpful?
Well, first of all, I want to get onto my soapbox for a moment, because it bugs the heck out of me that people seem to have repackaged resilience as to being about toughening up. This is a tough industry. You're going to have to toughen up. Now, you know what? If I was in a tough marriage, I'm not, I have to say. I hasten to add, I have got a fabulous husband. But if he wasn't fabulous, and if he was somebody who beat me, if he was somebody who used coercive control or some form of psychological process that was damaging to me, I don't want to toughen up to carry on and have more of that. If I was in a job, which I have been, where I have been bullied by my manager, in my first week in one job, I had a manager who turned to me and said, I've been asking myself, what questions did I ask you at interview that led to me appointing you, Zoe? To which I said, you told me on the phone that it was a unanimous decision to appoint me. I won't mention her name, but you could have a look at the character that I've got at the beginning of my novel and know who she's based on.
I bet that scene felt very real.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely based on the manager I had at one particular hospital. Again, if she's my manager, don't tell me to toughen up. That's not resilience. And so it bugs the heck out of me that we've got this repackaging of what resilience is into something about, it's my problem, I've got to do something with me. Not that at all. We're all programmed differently. We're programmed from a very young age. So how we are, what happens to us up to the age of around about 5 to 7 years old is going to impact on how we manage situations in later life. Equally, if we are neurodiverse, we're going to have different approaches to things like whether or not we are rejection sensitive. And the more we are rejection sensitive, the harder the rejection process is. I can take rejection. If you've ever done Myers-Briggs, I'm a TJ, which means that I'm somebody who I can look internally for my own validation. I don't need to have an agent tell me my work's good. I love it when my agent tells me my work is good. Claire, if you are watching, please still tell me, because I need those strokes. And when my editor puts the love this, Jasmine, keep going, tell me that you love a line. But at the same time, I'm not somebody who is desperate for that external validation. If you are, again, if you don't get that, then it's going to be harder for you. So the most important thing when it comes to resilience is, first of all, knowing yourself. Know what things knock you. Know what things you struggle with. Know what makes it easier for you to manage something. Maybe it's the group of people you put around you. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's going out for walks after or before something happens. It can also be, so something like this, I know a lot of people struggle with the whole idea of any form of performance, be that a performance that's about a podcast or be that a performance getting up on stage. And part of the reason that they feel that they haven't got the resilience to do that is simply that they've not prepared. And so preparing yourself, which isn't always about notes, but notes can help. It's knowing who you are in this situation. So we're writers. As a writer, who are you? I've been Queen Bee in another life. And in fact, book 2 is called Tell It to the Bees. And it's about that whole thing of we're Queen Bee in different places, but we're not always Queen Bee. So we can find ourselves in a scenario where we're not Queen Bee. I have absolutely been a Queen Bee in my work life. I am not a Queen Bee in writing. So I need to understand, who's this Zoe Richards? Who's this person here and now? The better I know her, the better now in this position, the better I'm able to prepare her. So I do things like, have you come across tapping? You ever heard of tapping? Emotional freedom technique.
Yeah, I've come across that. Yeah, I've not, but tell me more, because I think, didn't George do something like that?
There's a lot of celebrities who use it, particularly those who get stage fright. They will find that they can't, Michael Ball is a really good example where he actually vanished off stage because he got stage fright. And there was an occasion, I think it was the night at the Palladium, the Royal Variety Performance. And he was standing backstage and he was starting to sweat and he was getting panicked about it. And another performer, who I unfortunately can't remember who it was, said, actually, I use tapping. And so I tap before I go on stage. Now, at this point in my life, I was already using tapping, but I loved to hear that people who are famous use it. So, I mean, there's people that you can learn it from. There's a guy I follow who's called Brad Yates. He's on YouTube and he does a video on pretty much anything and everything. So I've used what he does for sleep. I've used it for attitudes about money. I've used it for interviews. I have sat doing presentations to senior execs where I've got chief execs in the online like this, when we moved everything onto Teams in the NHS, and I would have my hands below the desk and I'd be tapping. Even though I feel nervous, I deeply and completely love, honor and accept myself. It's okay. And I'd be doing this, and it's okay to be nervous. The nerves are a positive thing. They're telling me that this is something I want to go well. I'm okay being nervous. I am in control of my nerves. I'm okay. And I just say whatever comes into mind that helps me feel better. And then you're calmer. You feel fine about it. So that's one of the tools that I use around resilience to help myself. Even though rejection stings like heck, it's okay to be rejected because that agent wasn't right for me.
Yes. Yeah. Very good.
So it's
fantastic
stuff of that kind of nature. And the other thing that I think is really important within the writing world, though, is to know the industry as best you can. I still don't know everything about the industry. I have masses more to learn, but I'm making sure I learn about it. And then I'll know if it's right for me. So I know self-publishing at the moment, absolutely not for me. I'm not saying it will never be, but it's not for me right now. Whereas for somebody else, they'll be sitting there going, don't make me go down the trad publishing route. It's just not right for me. And we need to know and understand that for us, rather than following other people's dreams. Because when we follow other people's dreams, we're feeling the discomfort of it, because not only is it not our dream, we're not prepared for it either.
Well, I've worked in this industry for about 30 something years and I still haven't figured it out. That's all fantastic advice. Fantastic advice. Now let's get on to something really controversial. You recently tweeted, "Am I weird in that I quite like writing a synopsis?" Yes, you are. Can we discuss what it is you like about writing synopses and any top tips for writing them?
Again, I think it might be my career that helped. So the reports I would write, I always had to write an executive summary to the report. So that meant that I had to take something that was anything from a 3 to 6 page report. So we are talking short compared to a novel, but often my reports would start at 20 pages and then I'd whittle it down to what's the real crucial information these execs need to read. And then I've got to produce something like about a 100, 200 word, a summary, synopsis of what the report's about, but one that is going to make them want to read the rest of the report, because they receive so many reports, they're not going to want to read it. So I do have an advantage, don't I? Do you use Scrivener?
I do indeed. Yes, big fan.
So, the way I've set mine up, on the top right corner, it has a little box that says synopsis when you're writing each chapter.
Yeah.
So I just write a sentence or two in there about what's the purpose of this chapter. And then once you've got all of your chapter 1 or 2 sentences, I mean, the idea of it being there is for the corkboard, but actually forget the corkboard. It's a place for you to then gather. So I've just written a chapter today, and the chapter is to raise the emotional stakes in the story. So I've written a couple of lines into that little corner box that's headed synopsis. And then when I come to write the synopsis, I just pull all of these sentences out. If I can't necessarily add anything to the synopsis through adding in what that chapter's about, then it doesn't need to go in the synopsis. Yeah. So is it moving it forward? But also, if it's not moving the story forward enough, do I need the chapter? So it helps me to do that kind of thing as well. Somebody's just put up, that's genius.
Comment on screen, that's genius. Why have I not been doing that? Very true. I'm asking myself the very same question. It's so brilliantly simple. It feels like cheating almost. But it's also, it's one of those tools that I've used in editing. When you maybe if you're carding your edit and you go, okay, is this moving the scene forward or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then it's already there. You're already grading the scene or gauging whether or not it's working hard enough. So that must help in the edit as well.
Yeah, massively. And I've got to say, I am somebody who hates the first draft, loves writing the edit.
Yeah,
so give me an edit anytime. I love doing that. But again, I think that's possibly why I like writing a synopsis, because you've told yourself the story in the first draft. You've now fallen in love with the story in the edit, but falling in love with it at that stage rather than in the first draft gives you an element of objectivity. And I think when I couldn't write a synopsis was when I wasn't being objective.
Brilliant thing you also said there as well. You were talking about emotional stakes. And for me, synopsis has to be a roller coaster of emotions. I think the mistake a lot of first-time synopsis writers is, and then this happens, and then he goes to this place, and then they meet here, and then she says this, and it needs to be, he is astonished to discover, she is distraught when it's revealed in a tragic, but, I think you need to lean into that kind of hyperbole a bit, just to say, look over here, there's something really exciting going on. You're missing out. You need to know more, essentially.
When I sent my synopsis for Garden of Her Heart to my agent, when I was querying her, that was a 3-page synopsis. And I managed to get that down to being 1 page by the time we were subbing to commissioning editors. And that was literally just through me saying, come on, Zoe, you can do better than this. You can write exec summaries. What's the shortest version possible? And I just kept on trimming it down until it was like, actually, so many of these words are unnecessary. It's interesting. In Joe Moran's book, First You Write a Sentence, he talks about how we've created sentences that have become a word to us. So I'm not going to necessarily be able to think of one now, but incredibly important. Well, if it's important, it's already incredibly.
Yes.
But we've rolled the words together into being, it is single word. So we stop noticing that it is actually now 2 words. So where have we rolled words together to make those multiple words into 1 word?
Yeah.
We can now take that 1 word out of it and say, that's the 1 word I need in my synopsis.
I remember when they were teaching you at school, Emily, they'd talk about wow words, wouldn't they? And they get you to do this. And I remember saying to Emily, those are all the words that an editor will take out of your manuscript when you write a novel. Those are all the unnecessary words, keep it simple. When you sent that synopsis in, the book was already written. So you were drawing on the already written, because sometimes in film and TV, you have to write a synopsis for something that isn't written yet.
I have just done that.
How did you tackle that?
So book 3, I came up with the idea when I was on my solo walking holiday in the Italian Apennine Mountains. And a brilliant place for the brain to go off on one. And when I was at the Manchester Lit Festival, I was there with my publisher. And I said to her, whilst I was walking, I came up with this idea. To which she went, we'll have that. So I said to my agent, when we send in book 2, I'm thinking that if she thinks that she wants to have it, she actually needs to see the synopsis of book 3 then as well. And Claire said, absolutely, yes, let's get that in. So you need to get me a synopsis done by the end of the weekend. That was Friday. So she had, and that's one where it was like, absolutely loving doing this. I know exactly what the story is. I have just changed it a bit today. And that's purely because I realized that person X needs to actually be people Y, and the emotional stakes go up when it's people Y rather than person X. So I've just changed it marginally, but otherwise the story's the same.
And the thing that, again, a lot of people won't know about, and I was on a panel with someone at the MCM Comic Con this weekend. I forget who it was who said this. They sent in synopses of, they had a 3-book contract. Book 1 was written. They had to do synopses for books 2 and 3, and they sent them in, and they bore so little relation to the finished product, but no one complained. I think there's this thing where you feel like, am I committing to? Is this like, Moses coming down with the tablets? Am I committed to this outline and this synopsis for the duration of the contract? It's like, no. Obviously, you're going to come up with better ideas and go off in different directions and tangents. So I think if you can just release yourself from that worry, then it really frees you up to. Because I'm about to do that with a TV thing. We've written a couple of episodes. We've got a vague synopsis for further seasons, but they want seasons 2 and 3 sort of plotted out. And there's a part of me going, ugh, but there's also, no one's going to remember this in 3 years. If the thing takes off in 3 years' time, we're eventually filming it. No one's going to go, hang on. This doesn't bear any relation to what we bought. They just care what's in front of them in the now. And hopefully it will be better than what you initially pitched as well, because it all grows from that initial seed anyway. So yeah, just don't stress it, people. I think that'd be the title of this episode. Speaking of stress, I want to move on to the roller coaster story of an event you had, Preston. And now, for listeners, Zoe's burying her head in her hands here. I thought this was fantastic, and I know a lot of authors will have been in this situation where, well, I'll let you tell the story, that ticket sales weren't going in the direction that one might hope.
No, and the delight of not being told by the bookshop, who's, a large national chain, folks. I won't mention which bookshop.
I think I already have, but I can cut it out if you want.
Oh, yeah.
And there aren't many of them in the UK, and they both begin with W.
This particular bookshop didn't tell me until, the email came in Thursday. I didn't see it until the Friday because I was busy doing something else. So I saw this email on the Friday saying only 2 tickets have sold. The event was on the Tuesday. Now, I'm one of those people. If you tell me something 2 or 3 weeks ahead, I'll do work on it. I'm that kind of person. I will fight to get something happening, but tell me with a few days to go. So I emailed back and I said, this is a real shame. Any chance you can give me until Sunday lunchtime and I will get those ticket sales up? And the first answer back was, we can give you till this evening. And I said, well, I don't think that's reasonable, to be honest. No. I think I need to be given until Sunday, but I can guarantee you by the end of Sunday, whether or not the event's going ahead, and that gives you time to tell other people. So I went onto social media and I did what my daughter tells me to do, right, which is be vulnerable. She always says to me, Mom, be vulnerable. Stop being somebody who's a clever clogs who knows things. Thanks, Ellie. And so I was vulnerable and said, well, at least I know I'm not going to turn up to nobody being there because I've been told ahead of time that I haven't got sales, but I've got until Sunday to see if we can increase the sales. This is where you've got to say the book community and the writing community is phenomenal. I had people retweeting. I had people sharing on stories on Instagram. I had people saying, right, I will buy some tickets for you. One woman in Australia who I know bought 5 tickets, knowing she would never get there, bought 5 tickets. A few people that I don't know at all, and a couple that I do know, bought 1, 2, and 3 tickets. So there were tickets that were purchased to be gifted. But I was told I nearly said what the W was then. I was told by them that it had to be bums on seats. and not just ticket sales. So that meant I had to work on getting the ticket sales.
Right.
And people shared and people offered to do what they could to help get the word out there. And I just kept on posting about it. And we got to the point where there were 31 people there. However, I've got to say, reasonable adjustments were not applied. I've worked on special educational needs and disabilities, so this does bug me a bit that unfortunately the particular shop, it's upstairs, they have no lift. It was closed. They could have brought the chairs downstairs. But in the moment, my publisher arrived, I turned to say hello there. When I turned back again, the two people, one of them with a wheelchair, unfortunately had left. But I would have liked it if the bookshop had done reasonable adjustments. So any booksellers listening, please think about what reasonable adjustments you can do, because it's not fair. And yes, okay, the small print did say it was upstairs and there's no lift, but it shouldn't come down to that. It should come to reasonable adjustments. So that's my one bugbear about it. So 29 people there in the audience, and it included people who had no idea who I was at all, as well as a couple of friends who travelled quite a long way to be there for me. So yeah, I am incredibly supported. And it's taught me that you're never on your own, really never on your own. Even if it had just been people, because there were loads who messaged saying this has happened to me. I'm talking some big name authors who messaged me to say this has happened to me. Yeah. So to know that you're not on your own, and anybody out there who's going through this sort of experience, I saw on Twitter today somebody who turned up to their library for a reading, and I think it must have been a signing as well or something, and nobody came at all. And, it's heartening to know that actually happens to a lot of people. It's not the fault of the author.
It's happened to me.
So you know what it's like too. But what I think the other thing that's important to learn is, and I'm perhaps spamming a little bit at the moment because I'm on this with you, so I've been reposting about this. I've got some events coming up. I've been doing a lot of posting about those. People will unfollow if they're not interested. But other people who are interested will follow, they will share, and they will come along. So, we need to not be scared to market.
I could not agree more. I totally agree. Yeah. There seems to be kind of a shame among certain kinds of, we mustn't big ourselves up. And it's like, well, if your publisher's not doing it and the venue isn't doing it, who else is going to do it? And, I learned that lesson quite early. I did a thing at the Bradford Literary Festival, which, to be fair, Bradford Literary Festival is, when it comes to politics, non-fiction, that kind of thing, it's fantastic. When it comes to tie-in novelizations about robots, perhaps less good. And I remember I went to the beautiful Waterstones in Bradford, which is the most gorgeous bookshop you've ever seen. It's in an old wool mill or something, isn't it? It's just beautiful marble columns. No one turned up. So the manager wheeled out his son, this poor kid who was just sitting out the back minding his own business, got wheeled out in front of me, and I had to sign a book for him. I was a bookseller in the 90s and these events peaked, and you could just have an author turn up and you would, for some reason, get 20 to 30 people just turning up, and then they all stopped coming, and it sort of coincided a bit with social media, I think, as well. They found other things to do, so it's really tough to get anyone to turn up to a book event. I always promise cake, which helps. Maybe consider cake and booze. I
took two Collins along, actually. Colin the Caterpillar.
The talisman of great events is the Colin the Caterpillar. Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Zoe. I really appreciate that. Now we're going to get on to our regular questions, which I ask all of our authors, and we'll go through these. What small thing has made a big difference to your creative process?
Just sitting down and writing. The only thing that ever stops me, because I find I get more creative the more I write.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre thing, isn't it? So if I sit there and don't write, the writing doesn't get done and the creativity doesn't happen either.
You can't just sit down, not do anything, and get up and walk away. That's just embarrassing for all concerned, even if you're completely on your own. So turn up, show up, tap some keys, see what comes out.
I couldn't think of anything to start today, and I actually wrote, needs something about Hunter and his gang days, and perhaps something about when his dad used to beat him up. Yeah. And that's all I've written into one of the chapters, but it immediately made me go, in that chapter there, I need to do, and I just went off then and couldn't stop writing.
What's the thing that makes you think you're ready to start writing on a project?
The thing that makes me say, just go for it. I've got to know what the ending's going to be.
Right.
once I know where this is going, and I think, again, that goes back to reports that I used to write. So what do I want out of this report? I want the execs to give me £3 million for autism services. I have to say, spoiler alert, I never got £3 million for autism services for children. never happened. Great report, Zoe, one of the best we've ever seen. No, haven't got any money for you. So yeah, that didn't work. However, the process worked of knowing that's my ultimate aim, that I need them to know that that's what we need. What's going to get me there? And so it's the same thing with, I'm ready to write once I know where I'm going. I might change the ending, but if I've got a sense of where I'm going, then I can get started writing because I'm working towards something. It's like when you drive, isn't it? When I went to Nottingham, I can tell you that it's not in Northampton and the next turn off is Milton Keynes. So it's a long drive from near Liverpool to go. And I didn't use a map that day because I thought I knew where I was going.
Big lesson learned there. But it's very much like the arc of any character, though, isn't it? That a character will think they know what they need, but the story delivers what they actually need. You know, they have wants and needs, and that's very much the arc of any good story, I think, as well. You don't always deliver what the character actually desires.
And actually, that's another part of what I'm aiming for. So I feel like I need to know what happened to the character at either 5 to 7 years old or 15 to 17-year-old.
Right.
So 5 to 7 is when we sort of cement our reaction to trauma. It doesn't necessarily need to be what we as adults would define as a trauma, but it was something that traumatized the child. So it could be an incident that genuinely did happen to me. It could be sitting in the hall with the girl next to you, sitting on your gingham summer dress and peeing her pants. But because she's sitting on your dress, she wets your dress as well. So that traumatized me at 5.5, 6 years old. So it doesn't need to be a massive trauma in your life, but that cements your reaction to trauma. I was stubborn and I wouldn't change out of my dress, incidentally, because I'd been brought up to know that you don't touch other people's clothes. You don't. When you go to a jumble sale, you don't touch other people's clothes because you don't know where they've been. My mum thought she was posh. We weren't. We were working class, but that was my mother's hyacinth bouquet moment.
I love it.
So the trauma, the way we react to trauma at 5 to 7 helps to inform who we'll become. But also at 15 to 17, that's where we are starting to form our absolutes for early adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so who we are and what happens to us at 15 to 17 years old will help to inform who we become later in adulthood as well. So if I know one or other or both of those for a character, it doesn't have to be all characters at this stage, but if I've got my main character and I know what's happening, or I've got the antagonist and I know what's happening in relation to 5 to 7, 15 to 17, may not even feature in backstory, but I know in my head, and it helps me to understand the character better.
Now, you do know that everyone who's listening to this now is thinking, what happened to me when I was 5, 6, 7 years old? What? Oh, Emily's glaring at me. And similarly, when you're a teen as well. But you're right, it may not end up in backstory, but it is. I mean, I'm just thinking there's a moment in The End of Magic where I flash back to when Sandra Bree, my protagonist, was a child. And it's just thought, yes, of course. Yeah. So that's genius. I love that. Second genius moment in the show.
It's not genius. That's actually mindset coaching. So I've used a lot of coaching techniques to help me understand my characters. I've got into their heads by coaching my characters effectively.
How do you know when you're done?
Because it gets to where it's meant to get to. So my first drafts are, I write short. So I'm aiming for roughly 70,000 words for a first draft to have a final piece. So Garden of Her Heart, I think, is just shy of 90,000 words, but that was 70,000 at the end of the first draft. Now I miss some bits out and I understand better about story structure now. So book 2, all my beats were landing. Book 2, by the way, was book 2 version 2.0 because I had to set aside 1.0. So it's book 3, really. Right. With that, I was hitting the beats in all the right places. And when I came to do the edits, I was able to tick, yep, I've got the beats there on pretty much all of them, within 1,000 or 2,000 words. But then I would understand, well, what's missing in the edit. But yeah, I knew when it was done, when everything was hitting the beats at the right point and when I'd landed at the place I needed to get to. So book 2, 1.0, I couldn't get to where I was trying to get to because I'd created through the story too much admin. So I now needed lots of other people to explain stuff at the very ending, and they hadn't had points of view. So it was now too much telling and not enough showing.
How do you remember that idea that you have at 3 a.m, if indeed you do have ideas at 3 a.m?
Well, here's another technique from what I do with my coaching. So one of the things I'm trained in is neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Mm-hmm. And one of the things within NLP is anchoring. So like this morning, I woke up, it was actually 5 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, I've put branches in there. You don't use branches. When it comes to doing a wreath, it needs to be a twig. So I squeeze my thumbnail into my little finger. And then I suddenly thought, why has he got all the stuff in his arms, and why didn't he use one of the trugs? Oh, right. Okay. So then the next finger is the trug. And so when I then sit down at my laptop, I'm then going, okay, there was something on this finger. What was that one? That was, and I'm pressing it and I go, oh yeah, that's the twigs. And then press on the next one. That's the trugs. When I'm walking in the mountains, I do exactly the same thing. And sometimes I've got 8 different things that I need to remember when I get back to the car. And I then go onto my notes and I go through each finger and I remember each thing.
That's witchcraft, Zoe.
I am a witch. I am a witch. When I was 15, my nana asked me. My nana used to live on Pendle Hill. She was Welsh, but she lived on Pendle Hill.
Wow.
And when I was 15, my nan said to me, you do know you're a witch, don't you? And she wasn't joking.
That's a great answer. I love that, though. I absolutely love that.
Is that another? I can have another genius point.
Well, that's a hat trick. There we go. 3 in 1 show. There we go. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your writing career?
Doubting myself. So many years ago, and I'm talking, I think, around about 22 years ago, Writing Magazine had an offer from an agent that you could send in up to 3,000 words. Yeah. So I sent off to her 3,000 words, and she came back. And now I reflect backwards, and it's like, oh, she gave me such incredibly good advice. But I didn't get the, well done, Zoe, you are a gold star student. So because I was brought up with the coercive control of you are not good enough unless you are the star student. When I came home, second in the year, I'm sure you can guess where this is going, second in the year out of 145 kids, and I said, I came second in geography. And my dad's answer was, and what are you going to do next year to be first? And there wasn't a smile in that response. So I was always expected to be the best in class. So this agent didn't make me best in class. So I believed I wasn't a writer, and I didn't write for a few years. So I would say anybody who gets rejection, remember, first off, if they give you a nugget, store the nugget. You might not be able to accept what they've told you today, but at some point you'll be ready to accept what they've told you. And her bit that she told me was, write what you know. I can tell that you're writing something now that you don't know anything about it. So either write something you already know about or go and research what you're trying to write about. And I took it as being, I'm no good at writing. She wasn't telling me I was no good at writing. She was telling me it was obvious I didn't know what I was writing about. And they're two distinctly different things. Yeah. So anyone listening who's thinking, oh, I'm useless because I've had a rejection, what are they telling you? And then secondly, it's only their opinion. And if you are 100% sure you're right and you've written good stuff, keep going. But I think we've always got room to improve.
Now, listeners, if you're thinking, this is incredibly good advice, where can I get more of this? You have a podcast, don't you, Zoe? Let's give that a quick plug, shall we? Tell us about Right Damn It.
Well, yeah, it's called Right Damn It because I needed to remind myself to write Damn It. And I actually did the podcast because the government created something called Integrated Care Boards. And the one I worked for was told it was over-establishment and needed to reduce its numbers, so a load of us were made redundant. Nobody's ever made redundant in the NHS, so it was a bit of a shock to us all. And I was doing a job I loved with colleagues I adored. And so I thought, well, I can't sit around and do nothing whilst I'm looking for a job. And bear in mind, my kind of job, I was the only one in the country. So not the kind of job that you can get lots of work doing. So it was very, very difficult for me to find an identical job. I was having to reinvent myself. So what I did instead was start a podcast. And I learned what I could. and discovered that if I could do 8 podcast episodes, I was doing better than most, because the majority of people stop at 7 episodes or 3 months of running a podcast. So I said, right, I'm doing it for 4 months and I'm going to do 8 episodes. So we're now on episode 127 and it's 18 months old. Yay!
Fantastic. This is episode 3 and I've still got the will to live, so I think we're doing all right. So, yeah.
You've done one before, though. I think you'll keep this one going for sure.
What's bringing you joy at the moment? It can be books, movies, TV shows, music, games. What's making you happy when you're not writing?
Well, something that's made me very unhappy is that I don't know how long it is until I've got to wait for the next series of Slow Horses.
I know. Well, at least they've got a new series. I mean, streamers are cancelling stuff left, right and centre. But yes, there is another season coming. That was confirmed straight away. Yeah, we love Slow Horses on this show. Yeah.
I'm enjoying listening to the podcast History Hits with Dan Snow, which is a brilliant, particularly for people who are historical fiction writers, it's a brilliant podcast. So that's good. And I have just started to read The Examiner by Janice Hallett, which is brilliant. I love her writing and the fact that she has reinvented the epistolary. So, she's not writing boring old-fashioned letters anymore. She's using what modern day people use, WhatsApp messages, voice messages. This one has got exam stuff in it as well. It's very interesting style of writing. But the other thing, and probably the thing that's bringing me most joy of all, is walking in the mountains. It's my happy place. Yeah. And I've just walked from one village to another in the Apennine Mountains and had an amazing time, particularly the time. So I did one of my walks where it was literally inside a thunderstorm, thunder and lightning happening all around me. It was so exhilarating. It was incredible.
More evidence, if we needed it, that Zoe is a witch. I think this is, or at least some sort of weather goddess, I think,
Literally inside it. And I had to peel my clothes off afterwards because I was soaked to the skin. All my waterproofs failed to be waterproof anymore. And if people don't know this, if you get your waterproof boots too wet, they smell of cat pee. So you leave them at the reception and ask them to bin them because you can't bring them home in your suitcase. Thankfully, that was the last day of walking.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. I'm just going to quickly whiz through the things that are bringing me joy this month. And the first one is I was lucky enough to go to a preview of the film Time Stalker, which is a film by Alice Lowe, who people might recognize from Horrible Histories, Garth Marenghi, the brilliant Sightseers movie, which she co-developed with Ben Wheatley, and her own directorial debut, Prevenge, which I also highly recommend. But Time Stalker is this wonderfully twisted rom-com where Alice's protagonist, Agnes, keeps falling for the wrong man, dies in horrible ways, and is reincarnated again and again. It's brilliantly funny and inventive, and, as is typical for any British independent film, has been shown in approximately 7 screens across the country. But the good news is you can pre-order it to watch at home from the 11th of November. I've just done it with Apple. It's like $9.99 and cheaper than a cinema ticket. So enjoy that. I really, really enjoyed that film. Alice is a major talent. I just got back from holiday where I read quite a few books, but After the Storm by G.D. Wright, it's a proper twisty-turny thriller that keeps you hooked I'm talking the last page. There's a wallop right at the end of that. And the premise is terrific. It's every parent's nightmare, which is you're looking after someone else's child and that child dies. And it's a shocker, absolute shocker. And you are flipping the pages as you read that one. And the thing is, he's an ex-cop, so all the procedural stuff is really good. It's really, really solid. My 5 a.m. read, because I tend to wake up mind buzzing, and I like to read on my phone. David Niven's The Moon's a Balloon, which totally lives up to its reputation, one of the best celebrity memoirs ever written. Now, I know a lot of the stories have either been enhanced or adapted a little from reality, but it's it's funny and it's heartbreaking, and I'm going to have to move on, bring on The Empty Horses as a second one, so I'm definitely going to be checking that out. And in terms of music, I'm loving the new album from Boa, Whiplash. Now, Speaking of resilience, this is a band that has been going since 1993. They reached the heights of playing Glastonbury. They've endured all the ups and downs of a rock band, but then they started their own indie label and sort of taken control of their career. And their new album, Whiplash, is a bit of a comeback. It's just full of insanely catchy tunes. Now, full disclosure, the drummer in the band, the guy on the right there in the picture, Lee Sullivan, I went to school with him. I've known him since I was about 10 years old. I performed with him in his band up at the Edinburgh Festival in 1990 as well. I'm just over the moon to see him and Boa doing so well. So those are my recs for the month. You'll find links in the show notes to all of these recommendations as well if you want to check any of them out. Zoe, thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest. This has just been chock. You know, we pull out little clips that we're going to put on social media, and this might be the one where we have every single, utterance that you've spoken going out there as a little clip. This has been wonderful. What's coming next from you that you can discuss?
Well, it's with my publisher at the moment. I don't know exactly where we're at, but Tell It to the Bees has been written, and it's based on the idea that, so you'll have heard about when the Queen died, that the beekeeper, so she was the beekeeper, when a beekeeper dies, the bees have to be told. But there is a lesser known idea as well, that when Irish women were told gossip, to make sure that they didn't tell others in the village, they'd go and tell it to the bees. And it's that version that I've used in the book. So instead of using journal entries, I've got Georgie going and telling it to the bees. So she goes and has little conversations with the bees. So that is written and waiting to hear back from the publishers. And I am writing book 3, which there's a bit of a spoiler in the title of this. So I'm sorry that I'm going to have to spoil it for lovers of Garden of Her Heart. It's called A Christmas Wedding at Pinewoods Retreat. So it happens at Christmas. It's our wedding, folks. And it's at Pinewoods Retreat. Da-da!
Tell It to the Bees premise as well is a terrific one. And again, feels quite witchy to me, Zoe. Feels quite witchy.
You'll find that there's just that little hint of neurolinguistic programming, coaching, witchiness that goes through all of my novels.
I'm loving it.
But
Absolutely
it's witchiness without being obviously witchy. That's the thing.
A huge thanks to Zoe for coming on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Right. Let's talk about the Green Room. Twice a month, I run live sessions on Zoom where you can ask me questions about the craft of writing, your working process, or just the business of publishing. The sessions are fun, informal, and chatty. I thought they'd run for half an hour. They're all running for about an hour so far. You can send me questions in advance. They're recorded live and saved on Ko-fi for exclusive access to Green Room supporters. There's no long-term commitment either with anything of this. You can support just for a month or for longer if you want. Just pop in and pop out, whatever works for you. My goal is to be able to give supporters advice that's going to make a real difference to their writing and career, because the way I see it, having worked in this industry as a salesperson, bookseller and author for over 30 years, I've made every mistake so you don't have to. Also, just a quick note, I'm going to be in conversation with someone called Ben Aronovich. It's going to be at Oxted Library, 26th of November. Unsurprisingly, tickets are selling fast. Let me just say, he won't be yelling at me. He's a kitten, Ben. He's absolutely lovely. He's a brilliant author. He's fantastic in public, gives great writing advice as well. So, do check that out and come along. Now, speaking of weddings as well, Zoe, my next book is a bit of a spoiler because I had a cover reveal this week for The Corn Bride, which is the 5th Witches of Woodville book. And Harry Goldhawk has delivered an absolute beauty. This one's darker, more mysterious. There's a touch of folk horror there. Does that mean that terrible things are going to happen? Well, it is the last book in the contract, so let's see about that. You'll find links to all of those in the show notes and comments and stuff, so do check those out. So, yes. And I do have books. I've got books you can buy from good bookstores. If you want a signed and dedicated copy of anything, come straight to my store at witchesofwoodville.com as well. Robot Overlords is available to rent or buy, as is Unwelcome, which is also on Sky Cinema. And a big thank you today. Thanks to Emily for production assistance. Thank you, Emily. Woo! And to Kai Newton for the edit and Dominic Currie for the jingle. So we hear the jingle one more time. Next month's special guest is going to be the one, the only Mike Shackles, coming on Tuesday, 19th of November at 8 p.m. Mike is the author of the Last War fantasy trilogy, and he writes crime thrillers as Michael Dillon. Originally from London, Mike's lived all over the world: Hong Kong, Singapore, Beijing, New York, Dubai, but now settled down in Vancouver. In that time, he sold washing machines, cooked for royalty, designed a few logos, made lots of ads, but he's a fantastic author and a lovely guy as well. I really hope you can join us live for that. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, things like ratings, reviews, likes, shares, stopping random people in the street, they all help massively with the show. So thank you so much. Let's bring Zoe back on. Zoe, thank you so much for coming today. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on the show. So
thank you for having me.
Laura says, this is the creative differences I've enjoyed the most. I'll be checking out your own podcast. That's amazing. And
thank you.
GM Wright says, thank you, Zoe. Lots to take away from this. I'd not heard of tapping before, for looking into that. So we're all going to be tapping. We're all going to be neuro-linguistic programming as well. We're all going to be better people because of you and what you've told us today. So you've made the world a better place, Zoe. Fantastic. So folks, until next time, happy writing, reading, and being different. Who wants to hear the jingle one last time? I just can't get enough of this. There we go. 1, 2, 3.